This presentation is an organization analysis and recommendations for Lakeland Christian School. This has been prepared by Keith Overholt. This is a result of interviews, observations, firsthand involvement, and informal conversations with people within the organization. I'd first like to talk about where we're going to be going. We're going to first look at what systems thinking is. It's important to understand that in light of an organization, so we'll start there. Then we'll talk about an overview of personal systems. Follow that by a definition of what personal systems are, and then how we're going to apply those personal systems in the organization. Then we'll look at organizational systems, moving from the personal to the organization as a whole. We'll explain some major organizational systems, and then apply those to the specific organization of Lakeland Christian. We'll follow that up with an explanation of the PLOC management functions, and then we'll look at some correlation between those management systems that we started with and how the PLOC functions correlate those together to accomplish that. I think it's important to understand that while we want to focus on an application and understanding of these systems and how they're going to affect the organization through analyzing it, it's also important to start with what these systems really are. Because we're a school and we're mainly educators, I think an understanding of these systems is going to be helpful to lay the foundation for where we want to go in actual application. Personal systems are really the heartbeat of Sengi's book on the fifth discipline. And these 5 disciplines that are listed, personal mastery, mental models, shared vision, team learning, and the fifth discipline, are really what personal systems are about. They're individual, and as those individuals develop these disciplines, it's going to help the organization. Being in a school, we're about learning. We're about the students learning and growing, and we need to be doing that as a school as well. So these are necessary systems for the school to grow and the school to learn. There are certain ideas that will be integrated within each of the disciplines as we talk about them, and then as I finish this section on the 5 disciplines, there'll be further application of how these things can be applied to the school and also to individuals within the school. The more we are aware of these individual disciplines, the more the school is going to get better. We have to develop individually first before the organization can develop. They do all work together. They're not in isolation, although we'll look at them individually. We'll see at the end how each of these disciplines tie together and work together as a system. That's why they are called personal systems and not just individual personal ideas. The first of the personal disciplines is personal mastery. Personal mastery is about personal growth and learning. It's the desire for an individual to gain new insight into things. And it's more than just skills. It's not about developing a specific skill that they get better at, like a teaching skill, for instance. It's really an approach of life from a creative viewpoint, and instead of a reactive one and saying, oh, how can I fix this problem? Or, oh, this is not good, so I want to get better here. But it's really taking a step back and saying, how can I get better? Not because of a fault I have or a deficit I have, but what can I do that's going to be better? What's going to be more exciting? This idea is called creative tension. It's a gap between the vision of where I want to be and the reality of where I am right now. This is the central principle of personal mastery, because if I'm going to grow, if I'm going to get better, and I'm going to be energized to do more, there has to be this creative tension, which means I have to have a vision. I have to know where I'm going to go. I can't just let somebody else tell me where to go. Then I won't be energized to do that. So this creative tension is the energy that allows me to really do something and to think more broadly. There has to be a personal sense of purpose. This is really a lifelong process that we are constantly looking at, constantly reviewing, constantly refocusing ourselves to accomplish something. There's often resistance, even within ourselves, to this growth process. It can come from cynicism. I've just been doing this a long time. It's not worked. I've seen other people fail. Maybe what I'm trying to do isn't measurable, and because it's not measurable, I get frustrated and I quit. Or there's a balance that we're comfortable with, that we are happy with. Maybe we've been in a certain grade level for a long time or a certain position for a long time, and things are going well. So instead of upsetting the way things are going, I just let it the way I let it go and keep the status quo. This creative tension forces me to go beyond that and think, even though things are going well, could they be better, and how could I be a part of that? It's asking myself, what do I want? Instead of focusing on getting rid of something. That's kind of a negative way to look at it. It's not about what do I want to eliminate. It's what do I want? What do I want to? What do I see in myself? What do I see for my class? What do I see for my organization? And as I continually focus on the future to try to individually get better, eventually it's going to help the school become better. People who are truly committed, they truly care, are the ones that are going to perform. And these are people who start with this vision, this idea of growth, and focusing on creative tension, and they're moving forward. They're the ones who really care. They're probably focusing on growth because they care about the organization and they care about themselves individually. And this helps them to move forward. There has to be a commitment to the truth. Not truth with a capital T, because as a Christian school, we're all committed to that, but a commitment to the truth about myself, the truth about my class. If I'm blinded to the fact that my class is boring, then I'm not committed to the truth. I need to be able to accept that maybe my class isn't the way it should be, or my grade isn't functioning as it should, or my team isn't doing what it's supposed to. So I have to be committed to the truth of reality and what is going on right now. The next personal discipline is called mental models. Mental models are deeply held internal images of how the world works. What do we see as reality and truth? And this keeps us from going beyond there. See, we behave according to our mental models. For instance, we might have a mental model. We might have an idea that education must be done a certain way. And as long as we hold to that belief, we're only going to behave that way. We may say it can be other things, but if we don't live that out, then that's a mental model that we have. There's an inertia in mental models. Inertia is a scientific idea that things that are at rest will stay at rest. Things that are moving will continue moving unless some force changes them. So when something is sitting on the table, it's never going to move unless it gets knocked off. When something's rolling down a hill, that's inertia, and it keeps it rolling down the hill unless something stops it or hits something. We have inertia in our organization. Individually, you are acting a certain way and will continue to act a certain way unless something changes it. We have to break out of these mental models that we have, these ideas that this has to be a certain way if we're truly going to grow and be willing to change. We have to be able to test these mental models. We have to bring them to the surface and say, what are the mental models that I have in my organization? What are the mental models that I have individually? So there's a personal awareness there. I have to reflect on myself. I have to be able to recognize when something is holding me back. Or I have to know, are there infrastructures that try to institutionalize regular practice with the mental models? Are there things around me that I don't have control over? Are there things around me that are forcing me to think a certain way or act a certain way? And is there a culture that promotes inquiry and challenging thinking? We want people to be able to break out of these mental models. As a school, we have to promote that culture within our individuals. The leadership's mental models can be limiting. Sometimes it's not the individual teacher. Sometimes it's the leadership that has certain ideas, and because they have certain ideas, they don't allow the individuals to have that creative tension to break out. That's just a little insight into how these tie together. The mental models tie in with our past idea of personal mastery. Because we want people to grow, we have to break through these mental models to be able to grow. So there has to be continual learning and reflection along the way. It can't be just a flat line where I stop and I want to continue to grow, continue to learn. Leaps of abstraction are things that move from observation to generalization without testing. So basically, we take this idea, and without really finding out whether it's true or not, we just assume it's true. We just jump right to believing that this is the way things are. That certainly holds us back from an open mind, open thinking. Another personal system we have is called shared vision. Shared vision is this force that is within people's hearts that is a vision, a picture of where they individually want to go, and then individually, they start working with other people and form this shared vision. But it starts with a personal vision. When people have personal visions, which goes back to personal mastery, then they begin to work with people around them, have a shared vision. If we truly want to accomplish something as an organization, we have to move from the individual vision to that sense of commonality where we see the same thing as our future. This comes from caring about each other, from common caring, whether I care about my grade level, I care about my class, I care about my part of the organization, my team, I care about the organization as a whole. This really provides the focus and energy for learning. If I don't have a vision of where I'm going, I have no desire to learn. I have no desire to go. I have no desire to really think about that creative tension. I'm okay with the status quo because I don't really care. So that provides that focus, provides the energy. It uplifts people's aspirations. What do I aspire to be? What do I want to do with myself? What do I want to do within the organization? There's trust. There's common identity. When we work together on the shared vision, I now start trusting other people. If I stop trusting, then we're going to have a hard time growing. We're going to have a hard time moving forward. There's a commitment to the long term. It's not just about how am I going to get through the day or how am I going to make my class better today. It's about looking at the big picture. How do I want my organization to grow? What's the long-term vision I have? And then I have to move daily toward that. I have to work with individuals around me. The shared vision must connect to the personal vision. So our shared vision as a group comes from that personal vision. If I don't have a personal vision, I'm probably not going to buy the shared vision. It's going to be somebody else's vision. And if it's somebody else's vision, we come to this commitment versus enrollment versus compliance. If somebody else gives me their vision, then I'm probably going to have compliance with that vision. I might do what I'm told. I might be a good employee, but I'm probably not really going to buy in. I'm probably not really going to go the extra mile and have that common caring and sense of purpose because it's somebody else's vision. I may even get to the point where I'm involved, I do some things, have some ideas, but I'm really not going to go all out and fully commit unless it's my vision, unless I'm a part of it. And that's where commitment comes in. Strategic planning. We're getting ready as a school to start strategic planning. And I think it's important to have buy-in from all the faculty in part of this process. I'll talk about that a little bit later when we talk about the systems organization. But there must be commitment. And as all the faculty commitment and have complete buy-in, now it's their vision and they're more willing to do more. And they'll have ideas, and their ideas will help spur it on. And now it's not all top down. It's not all the people in charge telling, this is where we're going to go. Everybody's involved in it. Team learning is another area of personal systems. Team learning is about a group that must be aligned so they can function as a whole. You can learn individually, but if there's not alignment in your group, then you have a lot of wasted energy because people are working in different directions. Maybe they have a vision and they're really working hard toward that vision, but if they're not working as a team, then there's wasted energy. You may have 3 people in your group all doing their own thing that doesn't help the group become better. So the dimensions for team learning, it's thinking insightfully about complex issues. Individually, I might have an idea about one part of it, but everybody in my group sees things differently, and that working together as a group, everybody having input, sharing their perspective, helps us to be able to solve complex issues. It's innovative and coordinated action. It's not just talking about it. And there's roles that we all must fulfill in our group. To really have team learning work, it requires practice. It's not that you just get together one day and all of a sudden we're all going to be able to accomplish something. Individually, we're only so effective. But as a group, if everyone has input and everyone listens to each other and works through things, there's going to be true team learning that can take place. There's a difference between thinking and thoughts. Thinking is the idea that I'm thinking through an issue. Thoughts are ideas that you have, that you share, and you work on those. An important part of team learning is suspending assumptions, taking these ideas that I've held previously and being able to set them up and say, you know what, for now, I'm going to hold these out and we're going to talk about them and say, maybe this is right, maybe it's not right. If I'm committed to the truth, I have to be willing to suspend assumptions for the betterment of the group and the betterment of the organization. This doesn't mean that we get rid of them or they're wrong, but we just have to hold them out for a while so we can truly have open dialogue. Seeing each other as colleagues is an important part of team learning. I can't look down on somebody. In a school, it's very common for one part of the organization, whether it's elementary, middle school, secondary, to look down on another part. They think that group is not as important, or they don't work as hard, or maybe the classroom teachers might look down on the PE department. So it's important that we understand that we're all in this together and we are colleagues and have input. There probably needs to be a facilitator who can hold the context of the dialogue, who can keep things going in the right direction and be skilled in this team learning idea, so we can have, there's really dialogue and discussion. We need to be able to understand the difference. We truly want to be able to say the things we need to say and not have people be defensive. These defensive routines, as they're talked about by Senge, are ways that people get around confrontation because they don't want to deal with confrontation. They either just keep speaking, it's called speaking out, where they talk over everybody else and don't allow ideas to be shared and free-flowing, or they smooth over. They just want to make everything okay. But that eliminates conflict, and conflict can be productive. We don't want to avoid it. A lot of times when you work through the conflict, and it helps us understand what the true problems are, and as we deal with it in a productive way, we can actually come out with great results as a result of it, instead of it being a negative thing, like most people think. So the fifth discipline is about taking all these personal systems and bringing together and connecting them. Our organization is bound by the invisible fabric of interrelated actions. The individual systems, yes, they work as individuals, but they also work together as a whole, and they are related. This discipline integrates all of the other disciplines. It's about building shared visions, mental models, team building, and personal mastery, because they help the organization reach potential. Our organization won't move at all, it won't be a learning organization, if we don't have individuals at the school who have individual and then shared visions, who don't deal with the mental models that they have, so we can break some of them down, see what they are, and move past them. If we don't have teams around the campus who are really working together, if there's not personal mastery, then our organization as a whole is not going to grow. So we have to develop individually. It continually expands our capacity to create the future. That vision about what the future is going to be like, we look ahead, we see this is where we want to go. We have to expand that idea and not just have the vision we've always had. Does that need to change? Does that need to expand? Does that need to... And this idea of generative learning versus reactive learning. Are we learning just to fix a problem? Are we learning just because something happened and we want to solve that one issue? Or are we learning in a generative way, in a creative way? This is where creative tension comes back in. We see the vision of the future. It's different than maybe we've had in the past. So how are we going to get there? Where are we at right now, and where do we want to go? This is creating new ideas. This is what most people, when they get involved in this process, they may not like it at first, but once they get going in it, they look back and it energizes them and gets them excited about what they're doing again, instead of just doing the same thing that they've always done. It's also a shift from seeing parts to seeing the whole. If you work on just personal mastery, or just visions, or just mental models, you see things very individually and you don't see the bigger picture. But as I've begun to describe, they all interact with each other. And I'm going to give some specific application in this area in just a minute. But it helps to shape reality instead of reacting to it. I am now proactive. I am not getting out ahead of issues that might be coming, instead of always looking back and saying, what happened? How do I respond to it? And it also helps us to see relationships rather than linear cause and effect ideas. Instead of this happened, now this is a result, and what do I do? It's interrelationships. Everything ties together. And when I create my vision, that helps lead to a shared vision. When I have this shared vision, I realize I can get there by breaking down the mental models. So it all comes together. And it's important for the administration to use these ideas, use this terminology in talking with teachers, because some of these personal visions, some of these this personal growth is going to come as a result of not necessarily a meeting where we deal with all this, but maybe a personal conversation between an administrator. Maybe it's a mid-year or end-year review where we're talking about some of these ideas. So it's important for the administration to be well-versed on these ideas as well. And now the application. How do we take all these ideas of personal systems and really make it happen within the organization? Well, one question we have to ask is, do we have opportunity for growth, both individual and professional? I think one strength of Lakeland Christian is that there is lots of opportunity for growth. There is lots of resources set aside for this and encouragement by the administration for individuals to go to conferences, to grow professionally, to try new things. That's certainly a strength as I've observed the organization. I think an area we can grow is what do we do with it? We can help people grow individually, but how does that growth affect the school when they return back to the school? That's an area that I think needs to be continued to address. Creative tension, to push but not overwhelm. We want to be able to nudge people in different ways, but not overwhelm them with ideas that are ours. I think creative tension is an area that could certainly be done more effectively at Lakeland Christian. There's opportunities for this to happen, and it's happening on small levels around the campus. Certain people really jump on this and are constantly looking for ideas to grow, but I think it needs to be pushed even more. How do we help teachers to really get excited about what they're doing and try new things? So I think it goes back to that personal vision. Do we really help them to have visions? Do they see a purpose for what we do? And that's important. I think the strategic plan is going to be a part of that as well. Teachers need to identify the mental models we have and to test them and to talk about them. I think this is an area, there are some natural mental models that many teachers don't even realize they have, and I think it's important that the school takes some time to identify what those are, and as it's talked about, as it's done in teams or in groups or in departments, people will recognize what's holding them back. I think it's happening in a lot of places that people don't even realize it. So it's necessary to move forward to spend time specifically talking about what those mental models are, what ideas do they have that maybe can change, ideas that maybe they thought this is just the way it has to be, but the freedom to say, you know what, this has worked in the past, but maybe it's not the best for the future. So what are the visions of the teachers? Help them to identify those visions. Helping the teachers down the road, look down the road, not just look at today, not just look at this week. As educators, we're in a timetable of a 10-month school year, and we're so busy in the day-to-day that we focus on just getting my lesson plans done this week or maybe the next 2 weeks, and we're very short-sighted because we're looking at what's going on right here, and we have to teach this lesson, and we have to get the students to understand. And there needs to be opportunity to look beyond that and to really spend time looking down the road. And work days should really have some time in there where we're looking down the road, and teachers have the opportunity to look at vision, to look at maybe working as a team, to spend some time on this creative tension, not just focusing on what they have to do right now. True team building. There's a lot of teams on this campus. They're all over the place. How are we really effectively building those teams? There's some teams that are working really well, but then there's some teams that are kind of floundering, and they're just kind of going through the motions and not necessarily being generative in their learning. And that really has to be a focus. We want to help people see that our learning is not about fixing a problem all the time. Our learning needs to be about growing as a school and recognizing that when all these things personally are happening within me, it's going to make a difference in everybody else. My growth is not just for me. My growth is to help me individually get better so that I can help the school to be a better school. And then we have to look at the interrelationships we have. There are lots of things that go on here on a daily basis with individuals that affect other people, and that's what systems thinking is about. Realizing what are these interrelationships, how can I do things, does what I do affect other people, how does it affect me, and focusing on those. Now, some recommendations as a result of this. Number one, think about curriculum planning. In curriculum planning, there has to be personal growth. Am I willing to look at what I'm doing in the curriculum and move beyond that? Do I need to do something differently? Just because I've always done it a certain way doesn't mean it's the best way. Some people are in a grade level for a long time or teaching a subject matter that they've taught for many years, and it's easy to fall into the trap of just doing it the way I've always done it. But a willingness to be able to say, maybe there's a different way, maybe there's a better way. Whether this is in department or grade level, it can flow through the grades, it can flow through the departments. But I think this area of curriculum planning is a great way to take these individual personal systems and see how they can be interrelated beyond just my individual grade, my individual subject. Another area this can be applied is in the music fine arts department. There are some specific issues that the fine arts department are dealing with, and I think applying some of these personal systems will help in identifying some solutions to the problems. We have low numbers especially in middle and high school in the fine arts department. So what are the factors that are causing those low numbers? What is the vision of the department? If the individuals don't have a shared vision of where they're going to go, then it's going to be hard to solve this problem. Another problem of why don't students participate in both the fine arts and athletics? Some of these are tied together, but these personal systems will help in dealing with the bigger issue that they're facing. Getting together and talking about mental models, what things are holding them back? What things are holding back the program from really moving forward? Are there institutional things? Are there culture things within the school? Are there programming things? Does the fine arts department as a department need to grow? Do they need to learn some new things? Do they need to have more team learning where they get together? So all these different areas can help them to focus on where they want to go, how they're going to get there, and solve some of the problems. And I'll come back to this area in a little bit. But it starts with the individuals. It starts with the personal systems and them coming together before we can move to the organizational issues. Athletics. There are a lot of issues within athletics that I think that are very important to understand here. We have a lot of things going on in athletics that are very good, but they're happening in certain areas and certain teams or certain coaches, and they're not happening as a group. And I think it can be more effective if some of these personal systems are applied, the effect of diversity on current students. We have students who have been in the school a long time, and other students are coming in because we're adding programs and there's more diversity, and how are they being affected by these new students coming in? I think that's an important issue to talk about. Students, do they really see the vision of what we're trying to accomplish through athletics, or is it just I'm out there playing a sport? I think in some sports it's happening really well, in others it's not. So it's important for all of our coaches to really think about what they're trying to accomplish. What's their vision for their program, for their sport, for their students? Mental models are holding them back. The coaches come together and talk about their shared vision and help each other generate ideas. Once coaches get together and actually sit down and talk about it, this whole idea of creative tension comes back. There's all kinds of ideas that they can get excited about if they will really spend time with each other talking about it, but that doesn't always happen. There's a lot of focus on one sport. This is a big change in the last several years where students aren't playing 2, 3, 4 sports. Now they're playing one sport. How does that affect things? Again, getting them together, getting coaches together, talking about these ideas. Technology. Technology has exploded in the last several years. Some teachers have jumped right on and are doing a great job with it. Some are more hesitant. So I think this area of technology, technology integration, technology use has to be addressed within the teachers. This comes from individual teachers. What is their personal growth in the area of technology? Do they need to look at their own vision of how technology is used in the classroom? How does their individual vision of technology fit with the school's vision of technology? Are they the same? Are they not? What are the mental models that limit it? Do they say, well, I'm too old, I can't do this, or I just don't have the ability, I don't have the affinity for technology? Maybe teams need to come together, build ideas, share with other teams. It's happening in some areas, it's happening in certain individuals, certain departments. How can it have other departments? Working on these personal systems and how they interrelate help the bigger picture of technology grow. Now we move from personal systems to organizational systems. Personal systems are about dealing with the individuals within the organization and seeing how these different personal areas are interrelated and come together as a system, because none of them happen individually. But organizational systems moves beyond the individual to the organization, the school. And we are now going to look at see how we can see the organization as a whole and see that everything within the organization is also interrelated. Systems thinking is about moving beyond my department, my grade level, whatever specific area I'm working in, and seeing how it relates to the system as a whole, to the school as a whole. The personal systems, as those are developed, it leads to organizational systems. And we'll see some of those ties as we go through this area as well. There's a picture there of dominoes. It reminds me of organizational systems. If you take out one of those dominoes or some of those dominoes and then try to knock it down and make it go, it's going to affect the rest of the system. You can't take one or two dominoes out and expect the whole thing to work as it's supposed to. If you accidentally hit one too soon, it's going to affect it as well. Everyone has a job to do. Everyone has to work within. But if you look at some of these really big domino sets that are going, there's a lot of individual parts to it. And all those individual parts have to be done well to make the whole thing work together well. And it kind of reminds me of how organizational systems work. It's a holistic view of the organizational system. It builds on the personal systems, because if you don't have those personal systems, then the whole organization is not going to grow and develop. So we're going to start by looking at some different models and then quickly take those models and apply them to the organization, because the model is no good if we don't see how it applies to the school itself. So the first one we're going to look at is called a STAR model. And it starts with strategy. Again, it's a holistic way of thinking about the organization. So it starts with strategy up at the top. What's the formula for success? Our strategy drives what we're trying to do. The strategy then goes down to capabilities. How do we differentiate ourselves from our competitors? As a school, we have to draw in students, and we have to say, what is our unique aspect? How are we different from other schools? What makes us strong? What makes us better than those? I think this is an area, the strategy part, that we are very strong in as a school. We know who we are. We have a mission that drives us. Now, having a strong mission, and really in the last probably 10 to 15 years, stepping up the understanding of that mission and the spreading of that mission so everybody in the organization understands it, has been very important and effective. But that doesn't mean our strategies can't change. Our mission is who we are and what we're trying to accomplish, but how do we do that? Can we accomplish our mission by changing some of our strategies? And then understanding that if we do adjust strategies, that's going to affect all these other parts, the people, the structure, the processes, and rewards. And I'm going to talk about each of those areas and how they can be looked at within our organization. But it's important to see that all these areas affect each other. If we change our strategy, which then affects how we're structured, the structure could affect the type of people we have. If we change some structure, we may have to adjust people or adjust what skills they need. If we change the people, that might adjust the processes. Certain people are better suited for certain processes and maybe not other ones. Do we need to change rewards? Do we need to change how people are, how we finance and how we support people? Do we need to make adjustments with younger people or older people? Are there different types of compensation that are necessary because of the age of the people we have or who we're drawing in? So none of these things happen on their own. All of them, you see the lines tied to all these different areas. That's not that structure is only tied to people. Structure affects people, rewards, and processes, and all these things interrelate. So that's what's important to understand. Coordination and communication are a huge key when it comes to an organizational understanding, because if we don't communicate well within the organization and outside the organization to people within, then we're going to be limited. If we don't coordinate these ideas very well, then it's going to cause confusion. So now we move from the STAR model to the application of it. How does this affect our organization? How does it work within our organization? Well, I think our strategy is strong. We've started with a solid mission. We've followed it with a vision. But I think we need to continually revisit that mission, that vision, just like we do with the individual vision and then the shared visions. We revisit that constantly and say, is this working? Is this what I want? Is this the direction we want to go? As a school, we need to do that. We are not going to change our mission. We're trying to equip students for a lifetime learning, leadership, service, and worship. But how do we do that? And who do we do that with? Can that change? Are there different ways of doing the learning? Are there different ways of doing leadership? Are there different ways of service, of worship? Do we need to change that, expand that? Do we really have the competitive advantage we thought we've had in the past? What makes us better? Can some of those things change? Continuing to ask ourselves those questions and make sure that we are viable for the long term is very important. So the mission doesn't change. Our strategy has been strong, and I think it's a strength of what we have, but do we need to expand that or continue to adjust that? We need to constantly, as a school, be looking at that and not just always doing the same thing. Next part of the model is structures. How the organization is structured is very important to make it all work. And I think that's an area that can be looked at because it's been one way. We've made some changes probably 6 or 7 years ago, but that needs to continually be looked at. So looking at the leadership structure, do we need to add an academic dean? Do we need to have one person who's looking at academics from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade to have it flow more seamlessly? I think that's a question that needs to be asked and needs to be discussed. Going back to the mental models, is we've had things a certain way. Do we have it that way because it's the best way, or just because that's the way we've thought will work? We need to be able to break out of those ideas and talk about other ways to do it if there's a better way. Where does the athletic director and the IT director really fit into the leadership structure? We've had it a certain way for a while, and I think it's been as a result of those particular people and their skill sets that would come in, but is it the best way for the school? I think we really need to consider what their role is, and if we want to expand that role, and then the next step is the person in that place the right person for the role to help the school best move forward? Do we want to diversify our structure instead of just having a single business structure of education? Do we want to break out from the typical educational model we've had for so many years? It's been successful. We've been around for 60 years. We're a very strong school, but with the changing tide in schools are the things that we need to consider. Do we need to consider some sort of partnership with homeschooling? There's a lot of homeschool families out there that are looking for more resources that we have. Is there a way to partner with them and work with them instead of being in competition with them? Maybe classical education. There are people who want classical education but don't want necessarily a small school that doesn't have other opportunities. They would love to be here, but they want that classical education. Are there ways we can partner with them? Expanding dualment offerings. I think that's important to consider that and see if that's the direction we want to go. These are all structures that we have to consider as we think about how our school functions, and are there structures that need to change? And we know that if we change the structure, that could change some of the other areas. It could change some of the people we have, some of the resources and how those should be allocated. Should we consider off-campus, online learning? All these things are part of structures that I think we need to consider. The processes, how the school runs, how the policies and procedures work for the school. I think there's some specific processes that I've seen that might need to be considered. Rather than have one meeting every other week where all the administration gets together and deals with everything from calendars to future ideas to logistics to creative things to problem solving. It's all just kind of lumped into one. There's very different thinking that goes into calendar and logistical issues than there are from being creative and thinking about the future. I think there needs to be a consideration of maybe 2 meetings a week. One where specifically we're dealing with the nuts and bolts of what's going on, calendar items, how to make things happen and things to flow, and maybe a separate meeting where we bring up ideas and talk about the future and deal with that creative tension that we've talked about many times. It's very different thinking, and having separate meetings might allow this to happen even more. Maybe even separate and have some meetings where it's just the principals. There's different issues that principals are dealing with than, say, the business people or the advancement people. It's important that we all understand what's going on, but maybe there's some times where we can deal with just academic issues and the principals have to have a separate meeting or should have that separate meeting. In the summer, we have a couple days of administrative retreat, and they're always very healthy times. They're great for building relationships. They're great for talking about the future and thinking about ideas. And that creative tension really comes out there where we're really starting to look at the future. how can that be incorporated throughout the year and not just done in the summer at those 2 days? I think that's something that needs to be considered when we think about processes. Maybe bringing the athletic director in. He's never been a part of those meetings, but obviously he's a key person in timing. Sometimes we bring in the assistant athletic director. Other people do come into those meetings. Why not have some of those be a more regular part of that meeting? These processes help us to see the organization laterally instead of just from a hierarchical position, because now we're looking across areas. It's a very important as we think about how the organization runs, to think not just about top down, but thinking about going sideways and how all these things. Another area in the STAR model is an area of rewards. How do we internally, how do we motivate people? What's the compensation that people have for being a part of the organization? I think Christian schools are unique from some other schools. With Christian schools, typically the pay is not the same as you would get in a public school or maybe a private prep school. So there's a lot more internal motivation. There's a commitment to the mission which drives people to be here. And we're all, I think, motivated to a degree by money, but that's not the primary motivation, or they wouldn't be here. So how does our compensation need to look? Maybe there's a different way to do it than we've had in the past. Right now we have a system, the school has a system where if you're here for another year, you move up a level and you get more pay. So should people be rewarded just for being here without doing any of the other things that might help the organization grow? So this creative tension comes in when teachers are excited about being here and they go through this process of learning, of growth, and expanding themselves. Should they be rewarded for that instead of just being here for another year? I think it would be interesting to look at models where it rewards people for coming up with new ideas, for getting advanced degrees, and then doing something with those degrees. I think you can look at a model where it's tiered, where they come in on a certain tier, and maybe 5, 6, 7 years you're in that tier at the most. And when you get to the top of that tier, you can't increase in pay unless you move on to the next tier. How do you move from tier to tier? Well, that comes from maybe doing some reading and researching in areas that can help the school, getting an advanced degree, working on curriculum, getting reviews. All this involves breaking down mental models, working with other people, and getting a vision for the future, working on personal mastery to become better as an individual. And now we get some excitement about moving forward as an individual, which helps the school. And so I think that can change drastically. It's a lot of work and it's a big change, and it's important to get people to buy into this as well. Talk about shared visions. If this is just an outside idea from a consultant, or if it's just coming from the top and there's no internal discussion about it, it's probably not fly very well. But when people get excited about the fact that they can get rewarded for doing great things and for working hard, not just for showing up, it causes them to want to do more things. If they know if I just show up every year, I'm going to get a new contract and I'm going to get more pay, then it encourages that sort of thinking. The people, again, this is an area of strength, I think, in Lakeland Christian. There are good people here. The thing to focus on is making sure people are aligned, and this keep frustration out. When people are misaligned, either in their job or in their area, it causes frustration and quickly moves them to want to either leave or they end up not being productive. When people are excited about what they do and they're in the right spot, they're very productive, and they accomplish much. And that's what we want to do with our people, is making sure continually that they're in the right spot. And I think our review process needs to improve. I think one of the weaknesses of Lakeland Christian is a formal review, at least of outside people, outside of the teachers. The teachers, it looks different from secondary to elementary, and that's okay. So we need to make sure that those processes are strengthened, but especially the outside people, the secretaries, the maintenance department, IT department, all those areas that are not actually teaching classes, how are they reviewed? How do we make sure that they're aligned, that they're moving forward, that they're growing? That's an area of review. I think that would be helpful. Another model that I want us to look at is called the iceberg. It's a tool that helps us in our systems thinking about events. It is easy to look at a single event and react to it and say, what happened? But if that's all we do is look at the single event and then form our response as a reaction to that, then we're missing the big picture. And helping us to look at this systematically looks beneath the surface. Obviously, we know in an iceberg there's a small tip that you see, but there's a huge iceberg below that's really what the iceberg is. The size is phenomenal that nobody ever sees. And when issues arise in our school, it's important to look beyond just a single event. So again, I'm going to talk about this model and then show some application in some areas that I think need to be addressed from the school's perspective and how best to help use this model in dealing with issues. So we have to look beyond just the events so that we're not reactive, but we're actually proactive in looking at the bigger picture. Below the surface, you anticipate things. You look at patterns and trends, not just what happened, but what's been happening. Is there something that's been happening for a long period of time? Sometimes you don't see that right away. It takes time to be able to recognize that. But is this something that's maybe it's a cyclical thing where it's happened before and now we're coming back around to it? Are there structures that are causing these events to happen? Is there something the school is doing to bring this on or to allow this to happen? And maybe there's a design in the school that needs to change to help those events. Maybe it's not the event itself that's the problem. And then are there mental models? Are there thinking that is in the organization, whether by individuals or the leadership or the school as a whole, that needs to change, that's keeping something from happening or continuing to allow this to happen? So let's take that model and apply it to some specific things within the organization that will help to solve some problems, I think. One issue that the school has identified is there are students leaving in the high school. The numbers, as they come through middle school, the numbers are pretty strong. Even into high school, they are relatively strong. But in the middle of the high school, in 10th and 11th, we are seeing numbers leaving. So that's an event. That's a problem. So we identified that that's the problem. Well, now we have to look below. What's been happening? Is this something that just happened recently? Are there other schools in the area that have come in that are new that are causing this to happen? Are there other issues? Is there a curriculum change there? Is it a cost issue? Are there things that are missing in that part of the school that they have in other parts of the school? When students have left in the past, what levels did they leave? Did they leave between middle and high school, between elementary and middle school? So those are the patterns that have to be addressed. And then what's the structure? Is the structure of the school different there? Are there things in the structure, the design of the school, that are causing that to happen? Whether it's missing classes, not having as much opportunities for them, or students just tired of being here. What's really causing this to happen? And then are there beliefs, are there ideas we've had for long periods of time that are keeping students from staying? Maybe it's a focus on AP. We've been an AP school for a long time. Does that need to change to more dual enrollment instead of just AP? Will that keep people here? Do we need to expand the offerings and really, as the school has gone from, this school is different from a prep school, and the prep schools have students with certain state lines. Lakeland Christian has students from all different state lines, so does there need to be more class offerings that aren't honors and AP to help some of those? Because I think if we recognize that a lot of students are leaving aren't necessarily honors and AP students, they're kind of middle of the road students. So do we need to offer more electives to help keep those? So those are some of the things that have to be looked at beyond just, well, students are leaving, and what do we do? What are things the school needs to do? Are there things that we talk to individuals about? They can't just be said, well, they've lost the vision of the school, so we need to let them go. There's things that we can address. Another problem is the music program. I mentioned it briefly in the past, but why are there fewer students in the music program? Why are there fewer athletes specifically in the fine arts program? In other schools, that's not a problem. So what has to happen? What has happened? Why is that happening? So the top academics, we're seeing fewer and fewer of them as part of it. So again, we apply this and say, what are the trends? Is this something that just happened in the last year or two? Has it been happening over time? Are there things in the the master schedule that are causing that to happen. Students can't take fine arts and certain electives, maybe the high elective classes, maybe that needs to change. Are there other issues? Is there school culture issues? Are students just too busy? How does the school back down on activities to make students able to be participating in more than one event? Those are some of the questions that have to be asked and looked at. The mental model is another part of that as well. Is this school, are there people in the fine arts department, or and maybe it's students that have mental models that they can only participate in one thing or the other, or that people who participate in fine arts can't be in athletics? Those are some of the questions that have to be addressed as well. Technology is the same thing. Why aren't teachers using technology to the highest effectiveness? What's the trend? What's happened over time? Is there a design problem within the school, a structure problem? Are there mental models within those individuals that need to be changed and addressed? We know it's being used effectively in some areas, so how do we get more people on board with that? So any event be looked at and just said, well, here's a problem, and try to do a quick fix, or you can look below the surface and identify, as I have in some of these areas, the bigger picture. What are the trends? What are the patterns that have been happening over time? Is there a structural problem within the school? And what are the mental models? Are there beliefs, assumptions that are held by individuals or by the school that are keeping the school from really being able to get to the issue here? Another theory is it's general systems theory. This idea is that the organization is made up of interrelated systems that influence each other. The structure versus hierarchy. The hierarchy, I'll start with there, is an idea of top down, and structure has the idea of going laterally. And the systems theory shows us that there are systems and there are subsystems, and there are even super systems, which I'll get to in a minute. The idea is that the system, there's similarity in the components of these systems, and because of the proximity and the relationship of the components, they all interrelate to each other. But there's also some differences in them. For instance, we are a school. The school is the system, the education, but the subsystem might be the elementary, the middle school, and the high school. There's much similarity in those components and what they're trying to accomplish, but there's also some differences. They're all on the same campus. They all have to focus on learning, but there's a different way that might be able to be done in elementary and in middle school and in high school. So those are subsystems that work within a system. The functions are each individual subsystem has goals, objectives, and they can work independently but accomplish the good of the whole organization. The subsystems can team up. There's times where they can work together to help accomplish things, but there's also times where they can work individually. The subsystems need to be able to act independently and not always wait for the other subsystem to be able to accomplish something. That's the strength of this general systems theory, is that they can work independently, but they must understand that they do interact with the other systems. When they make a change, when they address an issue, there may be some overlap into some of the other subsystems, which is why it's important to be able to communicate and coordinate within them. But it's also important that they be able to make changes and adjust as necessary, that allows them to be more fluid and react to problems and react to issues that might arise. They can't always wait for a meeting. They can't always wait for somebody from the other system to come over and talk to them about it. So the individual subsystems are very strong and powerful and can accomplish much, and they have their own goals and objectives, so they can move forward and meet the needs of those individuals that they're serving. But they also tie together, and they're not independent to the point that there's no interrelation. Projects are the focal point for growth. Within those subsystems, there's lots of different projects going on, and they focus on how do we do this. Maybe it's a curriculum project, maybe it's an integration project, maybe it's a specific subject area they're working on. But as those subsystems work on that project, they can move forward and they can help the system to grow, and they can make changes as they need to. There's synergy, there's independence, interconnection. So again, they can work independently, they can make changes as necessary, but they also realize that there's an interdependence among all the different systems and subsystems. Again, communication is very important. If they don't communicate among the systems, there's going to end up being problems. Now, the application. Let me try to focus on a couple different areas and see how this plays out. Again, we're a school. That's the system. The subsystems could be the elementary, middle, and secondary. Athletics is another subsystem. The fine arts is another subsystem. And then the super systems within those, there's grade levels within the elementary. There's departments within the middle and secondary as a whole. There's athletics, which might be a part of the middle and secondary school. There's the ESE, which is a super system of all of them. International students is a smaller group within the middle and secondary. And then there's the RISE program. The RISE is the Research, Innovation, STEM Learning, and Entrepreneurship group that functions within the middle and the secondary school. So all those systems individually work, and the super systems individually work, individually do things, but they're all a part of the school. And while they develop individually, they can make decisions individually, they can grow, and they can have ideas, meetings where they go and individually come up with new ideas and are creative. They also have to go back to how they fit within the school as a whole. If they only see themselves and forget that there's a bigger part of the organization, that's when there becomes problems. The business office, the admissions office, the advancements office, those are all other systems within the school. They're subsystems within the school. And while they work individually, and when the business office needs to make a change, they're not going to talk to the elementary, middle school, secondary. But at some point, there's communication between the two to make sure everyone knows what's going on. And that happens with all the different systems within the school. And each is dependent on the subsystem. So the subsystems are dependent on the school, the main system. The super systems are dependent on the subsystems. So the smaller the area, the more they're dependent on the one above it. So they're all dependent on the school itself functioning correctly. That's it. That's systems theory. And let's move from systems theory to how it all comes together. And this is called the POLC, or the planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. We've got individual, personal systems. We've got organizational systems. All of those are important to think about and understand in light of the school. But in order to make any of those things happen, to make changes, to move forward, there has to be some organization to it all. There has to be some planning, organizing where we're going, some leading, some controlling. And there's two different charts here that describe how POLC works. The one on the top is more linear. You have strategy formulation. The planning is the vision and mission, the strategizing, setting the goals, and then how to make all those things happen. How do we implement those? So it shows it more linearly. The other chart shows it how they interact. You don't just start with planning and then go to organizing, then go to leading, go to controlling. As you begin to work on all these different areas, they all affect other areas, kind of like systems thinking. For instance, if we were to think about a homeschool program, there has to be some mission and vision thought about. Does that fit within the mission of the school? What's the vision for that program? What are the goals and objectives for a homeschool program? And then we start to think about implementing that. If that's determined that that's the best thing for the school, does it fit within the structure? We need to add personnel. How are we going to organize that within the school? How much crossover and overlap is there? What is the business office part in that? How is that going to affect the school culture? There's going to have to be leading that happens. There's decision making that has to happen in bringing them in, and how it's all going to work. There's communication. There's teams that are going to be a part of that. There's controlling, actually making it happen, the systems, the processes, the resources. All those things have to be managed and dealt with. So there's going to have to be people who step up, whether it's homeschooling, maybe expanding the school to other areas, a better integration of the sports, the music department issues we've talked about, bringing RISE in and making RISE more a part of the school and not looked at as an add-on part. That all takes work. You start with a plan, you start with the vision, the strategizing, the goals, but then how do you implement all those things in within the school? And that POLC is about planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. There has to be people that step up and do those things. It might be more of a top-down, and maybe that a principal has to take an area of leadership. But sometimes it doesn't have to be. Sometimes it can be teachers that are doing some of these things, the controlling, the organizing, and they work under a principal or some other person of leadership that can continue to drive it. But to think that a principal always has to do it, I think, is a misnomer. Now, an example, an application of the POLC related to strategic plan, and in this list of things that have to happen for its strategic plan, I've identified a letter by each of these that show how all of these things are a part of what goes on in a strategic plan. There's leadership. The leadership team, the admin team, meets with the facilitator to plan and say, what are we going to do? How are we going to try to do this? What's the process? What are we trying to accomplish with this? Then how do you organize the process? We want to get everybody involved. How do we set the tone? How do we get buy-in? How do we energize people to do this? Is there technology that's going to be a part of this? That's all the organization part. We plan, we set objectives, and then we organize and get it going. And then the leadership part, we set up teams, we communicate, we bring people in, we inform them of the goals and objectives, maybe get their input on those goals and objectives. We keep people engaged in the process. That's all the leadership that has to happen. And then there's the controlling of it, setting aside professional days. What time do we use? Do we visit other schools, and how does that happen? So there's all sorts of areas related to the strategic plan that involve planning, organizing, leadership, and controlling, and it can be done through the administration, through the leadership team, or individuals can be brought in to do that, but it's all part of this. Now, related to a specific area of fine arts, because this is something that has already been started, but has to keep moving forward. Everything that's happened here related to fine arts falls under one of these: planning, organizing, leading, or controlling. What's the vision of the department? If they're struggling with getting numbers in, these questions have to be asked. What's the vision of the department? Are there mental models hindering the growth in the fine arts? What's the truth about the fine arts department? What opportunities do they have that others don't have? This school, the resources that have been put into Lakeland Christian compared to other private schools are phenomenal. The number of people who teach in that department. So what are the hindrances to reaching the vision? What changes can be made? Are there new ideas that haven't been thought of? How does this affect other areas of the school? Is it realistic? What do we need to do to make this a reality? And are the resources there to accomplish this? All those questions have to be asked and discussed and talked about. Well, there's some planning that has to go into the meeting. There's some organization of those ideas and of people talking. There's some leading, as this has to get ideas, get specific objectives going forward out of this. And then how do we make it happen? What's the controlling part of that? And who's going to do all those different things? So the next step in this, some of these things have already been discussed. They're already identifying some threats, some things may be hindering them from going forward. So now that that part has been done, they can say, what's the solution? Now that we know some of the problems, some of the things that are hindering the organization from this particular area of the organization from moving forward, what can we do to fix that? And then the next step is, does that affect somebody else? In a complex organization, it's important to understand that if you're making changes and other areas are affected, that's got to be looked at and that's got to be addressed. It's not just with fine arts, it's with all the areas. There's a lot of different areas here in this under application that have to be considered. Technology integration and overall technology plan. This is an area that has to be looked at systematically as a whole organization. How can the integration better be done? What do we have to do to get teachers more involved in the buy-in and get them to move forward? The RISE Institute, how does that become more a part of the school and less of an add-on and looked at as just, here's these smart kids over here that do this and they don't really affect us? How does it become more integral? How to get more kids involved in that without their involvement in that taking away from involvement in other activities? How does athletics become more unified and not just be kids going and playing sports after school? How does all the athletic programs move in the same direction with the same purpose? How do we get more people involved in financial aid? How do we get people seeing the benefit of that? Are there organizational opportunities beyond where we're at right now, like homeschool, online school, classical school, some of the other areas we've addressed? What's the leadership structure look like? Do we need to add? Do we need to take away? considering we're an academic institution, does there need to be some people with more focus specifically on academics? And what seems to happen is the principals get so busy doing other things and involving people, and they're all good and important things that help in the other part of the mission and in developing service and worship and leadership, but sometimes the learning part suffers. So does there need to be a person who focuses on that? These are the areas that I think would be the main ones from my observation and my talking to people that need to be considered and looked at in light of all of the different models and systems that have so in conclusion, I'd like to think about these things. There's a holistic approach to the organization that must take place. The individuals and the departments make up the whole. When we focus just on individuals and just on departments, then we miss the big picture of what's going on at the school. It's easy to be focused on yourself or focused on your particular area and be oblivious to what's going on outside of the school. It's important that we see the interconnectedness of all that. So SIST thinking is a holistic approach to the organization and moving beyond just the individuals. The personal systems are the beginning. The individual growth affects the organizational growth. And as a school, we need to be a learning school. Developing those personal systems and helping the individuals to grow will help the school in the long run. So we look at those specific areas of personal systems to help us move forward. Then we look at organizational systems. What are the models that help us to look at our organization as a whole and see the interconnectedness of all those organizations, the parts of the organization. And we looked at several organizations' systems and how they affect Lakeland Christian. And then the last thing is bringing those together. How do we take the personal systems? How do we take the organizational systems and do something with it? And that's the POLC, the Planning Organization, Leading and Controlling. It's a way of bringing all those parts together, integrating the learning into action, and making it all happen. This has been my presentation for Lakeland Christian School and the systems thinking related to the organization with an analysis and areas that they can improve and recommendations.